The air was thick with the scent of pine and regret the night my world unraveled. I was 28, tangled in the arms of the man I loved when my nephew's wide, innocent eyes locked onto us from the shadows. That single moment, a boy's gasp, a secret exposed, set fire to everything I'd fought to keep hidden. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and I grew up in Brattleboro, Vermont, where the Green Mountains cradle secrets as tightly as families cling to tradition. In a town of 12,000, where everyone knows your name and your business, being gay wasn't just a choice. It was a sin whispered about in church pews and over diner coffee. I'd learned early to bury that part of me, to wear the mask of the dutiful son, the reliable mechanic, the man who'd never raise suspicion. But love has a way of breaking even the strongest chains. I met Lucas Harper at a bar in Burlington, 2 hours north, where I could breathe without the weight of Brattleboro's judgment. He was a painter, with hands stained by color and eyes that saw through my defenses. His laugh was reckless, his touch electric, and for the first time, I felt alive, not just existing, but alive. We'd been sneaking around for 6 months, stealing moments in his loft or on late-night drives, when I invited him to my cabin by Lake Wannistecket. It was supposed to be our sanctuary, a place where we could be us, if only for a weekend. That night, under a sky bruised with stars, we were on the couch, lost in each other. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced across Lucas's skin. His lips were on mine, urgent, like we were racing against time. Then came the creak of the floorboard. I froze, heart slamming against my ribs, and turned to see my nephew, Tommy, standing in the doorway. He was 12, all skinny limbs and wide-eyed curiosity, spending the weekend with me while his mom, my sister Claire, was away. "Uncle Ethan?" His voice trembled, not with fear, but with something worse, confusion. Lucas pulled back, his face pale. I scrambled for words, but they stuck in my throat like broken glass. "Tommy, go back to bed." I managed, my voice cracking. He didn't move. His eyes darted between us, piecing together a truth I'd spent years hiding. Then he turned and ran, his footsteps echoing like gunshots. I should have gone after him, but my legs wouldn't move. Lucas touched my arm, his voice soft. "Ethan, we need to talk to him." "No," I snapped, panic clawing at me. "He can't know. Nobody can." Lucas's eyes darkened with hurt. "He already knows." The next morning, Tommy was quiet, picking at his pancakes without meeting my gaze. I wanted to explain, to beg him to keep our secret, but how do you ask a kid to carry a burden like that? Claire was a single mom, fiercely protective, and deeply rooted in the town's conservative values. If she found out, if anyone found out, it wouldn't just be my life. It'd be Lucas's, Tommy's, all of us caught in the fallout. "Tommy," I started, my voice low, "what you saw last night." "I won't tell," he said quickly, his eyes flicking up. There was something in them, fear, maybe, but also a flicker of understanding. "I promise." His words should have been a relief, but they felt like a weight. A 12-year-old shouldn't have to keep secrets like that. I nodded, unable to say more, and we ate in silence. Lucas left that afternoon, his goodbye kiss lingering like a bruise. I told him I needed time to figure things out, but the truth was I was terrified, not just of being found out, but of what it meant for Tommy to hold my truth in his small, fragile hands. Over the next week, I watched Tommy like a hawk. He didn't act any different. No whispers to his friends, no strange looks at school drop-offs. But at night, when the cabin was quiet, I'd catch him staring out the window, like he was wrestling with something bigger than himself. I wanted to ask what he was thinking, but I was too afraid of the answer. Claire came back from her trip, all smiles and stories, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "You and Tommy have fun?" she asked, ruffling his hair. "Yeah," I said, forcing a grin. "Just guy stuff." Tommy glanced at me, and for a moment I saw it, the weight of our shared secret pressing down on him. I'd always been his hero, the uncle who taught him to fish, to fix a bike, to throw a punch. Now, I was something else, a man with a truth he couldn't share, and a boy who'd promised to keep it. That night, I called Lucas. I don't know how to do this, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Tommy's just a kid. What if he slips? Then we deal with it, Lucas said, steady as ever. But Ethan, you can't keep running from this. From us. He was right, but the fear was a living thing, coiling tighter with every passing day. Brattleboro wasn't ready for a truth like mine, and I wasn't sure I was either. But Tommy's promise hung between us, a fragile thread binding us together, and threatening to snap. The days after Tommy's promise felt like walking on a frozen lake, waiting for the ice to crack. I went through the motions, fixing cars at the garage, joking with customers, nodding through Claire's stories about her new job. But every moment was shadowed by the fear that Tommy might let something slip. He was a good kid, quiet and thoughtful, but kids talk. They don't mean to, but they do. Lucas kept texting, his messages a mix of hope and frustration. Talk to him, Ethan. He's stronger than you think. I wanted to believe him, but the thought of sitting Tommy down, of explaining why I'd hidden who I was, felt like opening a wound I'd spent years stitching shut. Instead, I avoided Lucas, letting his calls go to voicemail, my replies short and vague. I told myself it was to protect Tommy, but deep down, I knew I was protecting myself. One evening, about 2 weeks after the incident, I found Tommy sitting on the porch of my cabin, tossing pebbles into the dirt. The sun was sinking, painting the sky in shades of fire and regret. I sat beside him, the silence heavy between us. "You okay, buddy?" I asked, my voice softer than I meant it to be. He shrugged, not looking at me. "Why didn't you tell me about him? About Lucas?" The question hit like a punch. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. How do you explain shame to a kid? How do you tell him that the world you both live in might hate you for who you love? It's complicated, I said finally, hating how weak it sounded. Tommy tossed another pebble, harder this time. "Mom says it's wrong. What you and Lucas were doing." My heart stopped. Claire. Of course she'd said that. She wasn't cruel, just a product of the same town, the same church, the same rules we'd all been raised on. What else did she say? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Nothing. Just stuff she heard at church. About people like, he trailed off, his cheeks flushing. I didn't tell her, I swear. "I know you didn't," I said quickly, relief mixing with dread. "Tommy, what I feel for Lucas, it's not wrong. It's just not something everyone here understands." He looked at me then, his blue eyes searching mine. "Do you love him?" The question was so simple, so raw, it cut through every defense I'd built. "Yeah," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I do." Tommy nodded, like he was filing it away, and went back to his pebbles. I wanted to say more, to explain everything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I sat there, the weight of his question settling into my bones. That night, I drove to Burlington. Lucas was in his loft, paint smudged on his cheek, working on a canvas that looked like a storm at sea. He didn't smile when he saw me, just set his brush down and waited. "I'm scared," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "Tommy knows, and if he tells Claire, if she tells anyone, then what?" Lucas interrupted, his voice sharp. "You lose your job? Your family? Ethan, you're already losing yourself." He was right, and I hated it. I'd spent so long hiding, I didn't know how to stop. But standing there, with Lucas looking at me like I was worth fighting for, I felt something shift. "I don't want to lose you," I said, my voice barely audible. He stepped closer, his hand brushing mine. "Then don't." We talked until dawn, about Tommy, about Brattleboro, about what it would mean to stop hiding. Lucas wanted to come out, to live openly, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. The thought of Claire's reaction, of the town turning on me, was too much. But I promised him I'd try, for him, for us, for the part of me that was tired of running. When I got back to Brattleboro, Tommy was waiting. He'd drawn a picture, a crude sketch of two stick figures holding hands by a lake. "Is this you and Lucas?" he asked, holding it up. My throat tightened. "Yeah, buddy, that's us." He smiled, small and tentative, and I realized something. Tommy wasn't just keeping my secret. He was trying to understand it. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start building something new. The sketch Tommy drew stayed on my fridge, a quiet reminder of the bridge we were building, fragile as it was. But Brattleboro wasn't a place for fragile things. Gossip spread like wildfire, and I could feel the town's eyes on me, waiting for a misstep. I kept my head down, worked longer hours at the garage, and avoided Lucas's loft. Not because I didn't love him, but because every time I saw him, I saw Tommy's face in the doorway, and the fear came rushing back. Claire started to notice something was off. "You're quiet lately," she said one Sunday after church, her eyes narrowing as we sat at her kitchen table. Tommy was in the next room, playing video games, but I knew he was listening. "Everything okay at the garage?" "Yeah, just busy," I lied, stirring my coffee. The truth was, I was unraveling. Tommy's promise held, but I could see the strain in his eyes. He was carrying my secret like a backpack full of bricks, and it was breaking my heart. That afternoon, I took him fishing at the lake, hoping the quiet would loosen the knot in my chest. We sat on the dock, lines in the water, the silence broken only by the lapping waves. "You ever feel like you're hiding something?" I asked, testing the waters. Tommy didn't look at me. "Sometimes, like when I broke Mom's vase and blamed the cat." I chuckled, but it felt hollow. "This is different, huh?" He nodded, reeling in his line. "Are you going to tell Mom?" The question hung in the air, heavy as the humid August heat. "I want to," I said honestly, "but I'm scared she won't understand." "She loves you," he said, his voice small but certain. "She'd be mad, but she'd get over it." I wanted to believe him, but Claire's faith ran deep, and with it, the belief she'd been taught. I'd heard her talk about sin before, her voice soft but unyielding. Still, Tommy's words planted a seed, one I couldn't ignore. That night, I called Lucas. "I'm trying," I said, my voice raw, "but I need time." "I know," he said, softer than before. "Just don't shut me out, okay?" I promised I wouldn't, and for a while, things felt steady. Lucas came to the cabin when Claire was working late, and we'd sit by the lake, talking about a future where we didn't have to hide. Tommy joined us sometimes, asking Lucas about his paintings, his face lighting up when Lucas let him try a brush. Those moments felt like freedom, like a glimpse of what could be. But freedom comes at a cost. One evening, as Lucas and I walked back from the lake, hand in hand, I saw a flash of movement in the trees. My heart stopped. It was probably nothing, a deer, a shadow, but the fear was relentless. Brattleboro was small, and eyes were everywhere. The next day, Claire called me over. Her face was tight, her voice clipped. "Mrs. Larson saw you at the lake. Said you were with some guy, acting close." My stomach dropped. Mrs. Larson, the town's unofficial watchdog, had a nose for scandal. "It's nothing," I said too quickly. "Just a friend." Claire's eyes searched mine, and for a moment, I thought she'd push. But she just nodded, her lips pressed thin. "Be careful, Ethan. People talk." I left her house, shaking, the weight of her words crushing me. Tommy was in the yard, kicking a soccer ball, and when he saw me, he stopped. "Did she ask about Lucas?" I nodded, unable to speak. He came closer, his voice low. "I didn't tell her Uncle Ethan. I swear." "I know," I said, ruffling his hair. But the fear was spreading, a wildfire I couldn't outrun. I had to make a choice, keep hiding or face the truth. And with every passing day, the choice was getting harder. The whispers started small, like ripples on the lake, but in Brattleboro, ripples become waves. Customers at the garage gave me sidelong glances, their smiles tighter than before. Mrs. Larson's story had spread, twisted into something uglier with each retelling. I heard the word fag muttered behind my back at the diner. It cut deeper than I'd expected. I'd spent years building a life here, and now it felt like it was crumbling. Lucas noticed the change in me. "You're pulling away again," he said one night, his voice heavy with frustration. We were in his loft, the city lights of Burlington glowing outside. "You can't keep doing this, Ethan. You're tearing yourself apart." "I'm trying to protect us," I snapped, but the words felt hollow. The truth was, I didn't know how to fight a town that had already made up its mind. "Then let me help," he said, taking my hand. "We can face this together." I wanted to believe him, but the fear was a beast clawing at my chest. I left his loft without a word, driving back to Brattleboro in the dark, the road blurring through tears I hadn't realized I was shedding. The next morning, Tommy showed up at the garage, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Mom's acting weird," he said, kicking at a tire. "She keeps asking me if you're okay." My heart sank. Claire was circling closer to the truth, and I wasn't ready. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing," he said, his eyes fierce. "I promised, remember?" I pulled him into a hug, my throat tight. "You're a good kid, Tommy." But the pressure was building. That afternoon, Claire showed up at the garage, her face pale. "We need to talk," she said, her voice shaking. "Now." We sat in my office, the hum of the shop fading behind us. "Mrs. Larson's telling everyone you're with some guy," she said, her eyes locked on mine. "Is it true, Ethan? Are you gay?" The word hung between us, sharp and heavy. I wanted to lie, to keep the mask in place, but Tommy's sketch flashed in my mind, and Lucas's voice echoed in my ears. I took a breath, my hands trembling. "Yeah, Claire, I am." Her face crumpled, not with anger, but with something softer, hurt, confusion, love. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "I was scared," I admitted, "of losing you, of losing everything." She didn't speak for a long time, just sat there, tears welling in her eyes. "I need time," she said finally, standing. I don't know what to think." She left, and I felt like I'd lost her. But when I got home, Tommy was there, waiting on the porch. "I heard you and Mom," he said, his voice steady. "You told her." I nodded, bracing for his reaction. But he just hugged me, his arms tight around my waist. "I'm proud of you, Uncle Ethan." Those words broke something in me, but they also built something new. I wasn't alone anymore. Tommy had carried my secret, and now he was carrying my truth. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to keep going. The days after I told Claire were a blur of silence and tension. She didn't call, didn't stop by, and the absence felt like a hole in my chest. But Tommy was there, his quiet presence a lifeline. He'd show up at the cabin with his sketchbook, drawing scenes of the lake, of me and Lucas, of a world where love didn't have to hide. "You're going to be okay," he'd say, like he was the adult and I was the kid. The town kept talking, their whispers louder now, but I was done running. I called Lucas and asked him to come to Brattleboro. "I'm ready," I told him, not to hide anymore. He arrived the next day, his smile cautious but warm. We walked through town together, hand in hand, ignoring the stares. Some people nodded, others turned away, but for the first time, I felt free. Not fearless, but free. Claire came around slowly. One evening, she showed up at the cabin, her eyes red but steady. "I don't understand it," she said, her voice raw. "But you're my brother, and I love you." We hugged, and it felt like coming home. She met Lucas, and though it was awkward, there was a spark of hope in her smile. Tommy watched it all, his sketchbook tucked under his arm, and I knew he'd been the bridge between us. Months later, Lucas and I moved to Burlington, where we could build a life without shadows. Tommy visited often, his drawings now full of color, of us laughing by the lake, of a family that had bent but not broken. The secret we'd shared had burned deep, but it had also lit the way forward. Looking back, I realized it wasn't just about coming out. It was about trust, Tommy's trust in me, mine in him, and ours in the people we loved. Brattleboro wasn't ready for my truth, but Tommy was. And in his small, brave heart, I found the courage to be myself.